1,000 stripes in my soul. Steel toes on, boots in the gravel, heartland truth on every channel. Open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe when we don't talk at all. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. We back the bad, we guard the border. We love our guns and law and order. They try to shame every word we say, but we don't bow down, we just press play. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the bell. Hey, we won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. You can cancel the show, but not the crowd. We're still here, still talking loud. Hand of the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rail from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
All right, good morning, everybody. Let us get after it. What do you say? It is a Thursday, and yeah, ding dong, the Nazi is dead. His career, anyway. Yeah, Graham Platner has been taken to the train station. And anybody ever watched Yellowstone knows exactly what I'm talking about. Right, except he jumped in, or jumped over, I should say, over the cliff himself. What a coward. What a big freaking coward. Honestly. I mean, I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he did it. We're going to talk all about it. But when you think about it, too, what a ginormous blank USSY. What a big, seriously. He went on an 11-minute tirade in his little, well, it wasn't a tirade. It was, it was kind of like that passive aggressive. It was like, sniff, and my campaign is over. But this terrible machine that is taking me out. And, it's just like, he's tough guy, but he's whiny guy. He's cryy guy. He's coward guy. He's wussy guy. What a wuss. Mr. Big Tough Guy. This is the guy that they wanted to try to somehow bring back the male voters that they started hemorrhaging in 2024, or didn't start, but maybe it really got finished off then, because they kept. I said this. I don't know if I actually said this in my road rant video about him or not. I did do a road rants video about him. Just the Democrat Party has to pay a price. It can't just be, well, our candidate turned out to be a bad guy. It turned out he may have raped somebody, and so we have no choice but to, move on. And we did what's right, though. We're moral. We got rid of the guy that may have raped somebody. So, our books are balanced. We're square. You can still trust us. Look at how noble and moral we are. Horse crap. because they knew every bit, every inch of the other things about him too. And they were like, he's our guy. Nazi tattoo, no problem. Sexting women, other women, sexting, not texting, not just chatting with, but sexting women while he's married, still our family man. Trolling around on platforms, dating platforms, the ones populated by 13 to 24-year-olds. That's still our Graham. He's the guy to win in Maine. Saying that Purple Heart recipients should have been killed. Still our guy. He's a military guy himself. So, and he suffered some PTSD. So maybe he doesn't know always what he's talking about with these things, but that's still our man. Domestic violence, pinning girlfriends' arms behind their backs, shoving them into doors and through doors and closing them and locking them inside so they can't get out, which is a form of kidnapping. Hey, we got to fight the oligarchy. We got to stop Trump. We need Maine. That's still our man. Until they saw the polls, until they saw the numbers, until they realized, holy crap, we can't beat Susan Collins with him. Let's bring out the rape victim that they had under wraps the entire time. Go tell your story now. It'll give us a reason to pull our endorsements, to pull the money, to basically abandon the campaign. That's what they did. They took him to the train station and they threw him over the edge. And again, that's a Yellowstone reference. We'll just call it, if you know, you know. If you don't, that's okay. Watch it sometime. You might enjoy it. I bet if you just looked it up on YouTube or one of the platforms, the video platforms, somebody being taken to the train station from Yellowstone, you'll get the picture. So that's what they did. And he accepted it. And he did his little passive-aggressive cry voice. 11 solid minutes people had to listen to this. Well, if you wanted to find out what he was going to say, you didn't have to listen to this. But 11 solid minutes. He apparently pulled over by the side of the road. Maybe he saw a porta potty that he wanted to pleasure himself in. I forgot about that part too. Oh, I also forgot to mention that he not only has he been incredibly accused of rape, he fantasized about raping men. That was the other one. Hopes somebody breaks into his house someday. So a home invader comes into his house so that he can rape him. Graham Platner said this. Not in a gay way, not in a sexual way. No. But just to prove my dominance. We've covered all of this ground before. But it's important to note now because the Democrat Party is trying to pretend that before the rape, we thought he was a good guy. They were willing to excuse all of the things I'm talking about right now. But now that the rape victim came out and said, yeah, he raped me 5 years ago, and they've all known this, now they have an excuse to try to find somebody else. So anyway, for 11 minutes, this guy just rambled about how terrible and how bad the system is and so on and so forth. I had to listen to it, so do you. Just kidding. I'm not going to make you listen to 11 minutes, 53 seconds. We're going to cut to the chase. The only important part of this is this part. So let's listen to this big, tough Mr. He's the guy who's going to bring back the toxic masculinity to the party, bring it to the party. Remember, they drove masculine males out of the party in 24 by calling them toxic and calling them parts of the patriarchy, the horrible system of injustice created in this country by men. And men went and said, yeah, well, we're voting for the other side. Then they said, just kidding. Can you come back? Toxically masculine men. Here, look at this tough guy. He can grow a beard and he's an ex-Marine and everything. And he's tough, and listen to him talk. He wants to rape men. But he also roughs up women too, so he's really toxically masculine. Will you come back? This is the guy. This is what they did. This is who they chose. They chose to get in bed with a very, very bad guy. And as you're laying there in bed with them, Democrat Party, if something bad happens to you while you're in that bed, you deserved it. And I mean that metaphorically, and I mean that politically, and you deserved it. But here's Mr. Toxic, masculine, tough guy who's going to come back and fight against the oligarchy. Fight against Orange Man bad. Here's our big, strong, tough man, Graham Platner, giving it all up yesterday. Listen.
We believe that for the movement to continue, it can't be made.
Pause. Long dramatic effect.
For that reason,
Pause. Beard stroke.
we are suspending campaign operations.
He what? You know what? I would have had more respect for him if he just did an old WWE match, an I quit match. I would rather have him just say I quit, because that's what he did. But no, we're suspending campaign operations. Do you think that makes you sound any less of a quitter? You quit. You quit. You quit because you're a coward and you're a phony tough guy. You're cosplaying as a toxically masculine guy when in reality you're fantasizing about raping men for dominance.
This is incredibly difficult because I know that some will think it's an admission of guilt, and it most certainly is not. We're not doing it because of the allegations. We're doing it because of the structures that are being taken away from us by those in power.
The structures.
And I also feel an immense amount of responsibility to everyone who has worked so hard to get us to where we are.
What's this us crap? Nobody else raped a woman in your campaign. Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what kind of company you keep, so I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But enough of this us stuff. I'm not suspending campaign operations because of the allegations, because they're completely false. I'm straight up innocent. That woman who came out here, a strong liberal Democrat who has supported me and this campaign because beating Trump meant everything. She's a Democrat who admitted on camera that she had kept all of this quiet because it was more important for her party to stop Trump. She didn't say the word stop Trump, but to support this candidate to try to flip this seat in Maine from red to blue. It's a Democrat that is accusing him of rape. It's going to harm her party as well as him and his. And he's going, she just made all of that up. Totally false. Just who's that woman? What are you talking about? So Graham Platner quit and cut and run like a freaking coward, which I think he has always been. Always been. He tries to cosplay. He tries to put on I look at my death's head. Here's my Totenkopf. Totenkopf. He knew what it was called. His death's head Nazi tattoo. Tough guy, like the Nazis. Communist too. Wants to take it from the rich. Give it to everybody else. He played the role. And when it came time to stand up and be the tough guy, if you were truly innocent, I will sue her ass all the way to the freaking end of time for calling me a rapist and telling me that telling people that I shouldn't be a senator. He would fight, as a great man once said. But no, he quits. I quit. He didn't even have the guts to say it, though. WWE match would have been hilarious if he'd have just screamed, I quit. So, how are Democrats responding to this? Well, I can't speak for all of them, the ones that got in bed with him and now might be being taken advantage of by him. But there is somebody who never got into bed with him. About the only reasonable Democrat left in that party, I think, John Fetterman, which is just all kinds of hilarious because John Fetterman's the guy who had brain damage. He was a radical, wacko left liberal when before he had brain damage. Then he had a stroke. A bunch of oxygen was denied to his brain. And then when he recovered from it, pretty miraculously, by the way, his brain was back into normal function and he became far more conservative. Still a Democrat, but far more conservative in his ideas and in his public statements and so forth. John Fetterman is one who will not let Platner just slink away easily. He wants everybody to know exactly what this looks like for Platner. He opposed him being nominated from the very beginning of what it does to the party and so forth. So John Fetterman pulled no punches yesterday on Laura Ingraham after Graham's little roadside I'm suspending campaign operations.
Senator, thank you for calling in and joining us. What did you make of that announcement?
Sorry, not on, I said Laura Ingraham, on Water Show, filled in by Charlie Hurt.
I'd say that the trash took itself out, you know, threw it out. Yeah. And now he leaves an accused rapist. He's the guy that he'll be remembered, a guy that spent 10 years in Kick, the platform, that's the Predator's Paradise. He now defiled his marriage and sent sexual messages to women as a newlywed, you know, and all the things he said. Now he gets to go away. He can go back online. He can go around doing all the kinds of things. But yeah, the trash took itself out tonight, and now finally, people in Maine have a chance to really vote on someone.
I just want to highlight that for a minute because Fetterman that was solid. The trash took itself out tonight. That's outstanding. Tap dance on this Nazi son of a bee's political grave. That's exactly what had to happen, and especially from somebody in that party to retain and to exhibit an ounce of integrity. Just this much, just a little bit of actual integrity is really a great thing to hear.
It's not a piece of trash.
How would you like to see that process carried out in Maine?
Actually, I'll pause it there. I don't need to hear the rest of this. This is the most important part that I wanted you to hear there was John Fetterman saying the trash took itself out. This is a guy who is going to be remembered as nothing but being an accused rapist who quit his campaign. That is exactly correct. Because as if this thing went forward, obviously this campaign, he was going to lose anyway, which is why they went ahead and decided to Joe Biden him. They Bidened him. Just like when Biden had the disastrous campaign performance, or excuse me, debate performance against President Trump, and they knew, holy crap, he cannot win. We're going to cut him out now. We're going to eliminate democracy. And I cannot overstate that part of this. Seriously, we're talking about literally ending democracy. The party that is constantly screaming, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, is the party that took the votes, all of which went for Joe Biden in the Democrat primary in 2024, all of which went to Joe Biden, all of those millions of Democrat voters who said, yeah, the incumbent president, that's who we want. Who cares if he doesn't know what day of the week it is or where he's going or that he's shaking hands with invisible people on stages? That's our guy. They voted for him in the Democratic process, and the Democrat Party then said, screw the Democrat process, and they cut him off and said, Kamala, you're in now. Same thing just happened. The Democrat Party, the party of democracy, took the people who used democracy and voted for Graham Platner and said, yeah, we don't care what you want. You might want the Nazi tattoo communist, but he can't win now. So we're going to bring out the rape victim and we're going to let her tell the story and force him out. And now they're going to handpick somebody else to run. And Graham Platner wanted to be a part of that too, by the way. Graham Platner wanted to pick his own replacement, contingent upon his resignation or suspending of his campaign operations, his quitting. He wanted to be able to pick his replacement because he wanted somebody as radical as him. Problem is the Democrat Party looked and they searched and they could not find anybody else with a Nazi tattoo who was also a socialist. They found a socialist or two that might be in line here. But anyway, they're not going to let democracy win. They're going to handpick somebody to take his spot because democracy is over. The primary is over. Maine Democrat Party Executive Director Devin Murphy Anderson, quote, The integrity of this process is just as important as the outcome. Integrity. There's that word again. It's got to just be so foreign. I mean, how many typos when they send out messages like this? How many typos are there as their fingers just trying to make out the word integrity? It's so foreign to them. They have to go back and do spell check 15 times because they don't use it ever. They sure as hell don't exhibit it. The integrity of this process is as important as the outcome. If they had integrity, they wouldn't have nominated a Nazi who committed domestic violence against women and planned to rape men. We are committed to ensuring that Democrats across our state can have confidence in both. Unfortunately, Graham Platner's team has repeatedly reached out to us in an attempt to put their thumb on the scale of what this process looks like. We have repeatedly reiterated to Graham Platner's team that they have no role in determining our next Democratic nominee. 5 days ago, they were holding his arm in the air and saying, here's the champion for Maine. Here's the next senator in the United States Senate. Now it's like, no, we told him you can't have any role whatsoever. We have also reiterated that Platner must drop out of this race so the Democrats in Maine can focus on defeating Susan Collins this November. You know, here's the reality, by the way, for us, and we have to acknowledge this. I think if we're being fair, we have to acknowledge the fact that there's a consolation prize in it for the Democrats. If they nominate somebody who has no chance, just like it turned out Graham Platner was going to have no chance. The consolation prize for the Democrats is they still have Susan Collins. The Republican that they want to beat is one of the worst Republicans in the entirety of the United States Congress, not just the Senate, but all 535. She's a rhino first class. She might as well just be a registered Democrat, considering how many times she votes against the conservative majority. So it's not like they're left with, John Kennedy or Bernie Moreno or some, some stalwart Ted Cruz, some stalwart conservative, senator there. They still have Susan Collins. So it's not like all is lost. You still have something of a friend in her. But I still want to focus on Graham Platner's decision to scream, "I quit." Okay, that's what if he had any honesty, he would have screamed, "I quit." But instead, he just said, "I'm suspending campaign operations." Sniff, 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 sniff. And the Democrats are all trying to, like I said, to weigh in on this and try to pretend they were all caught off guard by this. And now it's time to pick the replacement candidate. They have to do this. What is today, the 9th? They have to do this by the 13th. So they got 4 days left. They have to pick their candidate to put a name on that ballot. And so it's not much time, obviously. Scott Jennings on CNN, who again continues to be the only voice of logic and reason on that network full of just absolute crap, yesterday making them feel the pain of the truth. Listen.
Well, if Platner doesn't drop out, Susan Collins is certainly going to be reelected. I mean, he's as damaged right now as any candidate could possibly be. I got to tell you, I find this attitude, though, from the Democrats about picking the nominee and telling Graham Platner what he has to do a little strange for the party of democracy. They seem to have forgotten that he won the Democratic Party primary and got the most votes. And other than this latest allegation, all these other things that we know about Graham Platner were known at the time, and nobody seemed to have a problem with it. I don't actually.
They had problems with it. There was a lot of critique.
What percentage of the vote did he get?
You said they had no problem with. I understand your point, but there was criticism about the tattoo, criticism about the text. People in the party didn't even endorse
Bernie
them overall.
Sanders, Elizabeth
That's
Warren,
2 senators.
Ro Khanna,
and they are representative of a faction of the Democratic
all
Party.
these people coming forward and defending every single thing until now, which leads me to believe they don't actually care about this rape victim. They just care that his poll numbers have fallen to the point where they don't believe he's viable any longer.
That's why they Bidened him. That's why they train stationed him. That's the reality. He was no longer viable, couldn't win. So all of the stuff that we defended, did you see or hear them saying, "What do you mean?" There were plenty of people in the Democrat Party who condemned him and criticized him. And that's when Jenny, what vote did he win by? What percentage of the Democrat primary did he win? He won, I don't know. It was like 80% or something. the party writ large absolutely loved everything about him, or were willing to write off and excuse everything about him that we knew. All of those things that I listed, the myriad of crimes and statements and conduct and behavior and the tattoo and everything else, they were willing to put it all aside because the most important thing was stop Trump.
He won a primary. He has chosen not to drop out yet. Maybe he will drop out. If he
Apparently, this is yesterday, must have been early evening, because he dropped out in what? It was a little bit after 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Shame or decency, he wouldn't have run in the first place. But this is where we are, not because of anything Susan Collins has done or anything anybody else has done. This is what the Democrats did to themselves. And whether they pick Nirav Shah, who, by the way, I was shocked. He just started his campaign for the Senate by saying that he condones Democrat candidates for the Senate committing domestic violence as long as the victim is a Republican woman. That's what he said.
Hold on, Scott, because I have the same ears that you do, but maybe my hearing was better during that segment. He did not say that.
You asked him point blank.
And he did not say, I condone domestic violence because if the Republicans.
He stuck with him.
But even more than that.
What would you call that?
But even, you told me that he just said that, right? He did not say that. And so
he said that by saying, I'm still with Graham Platner, you dunderhead. I mean, seriously. How buffoonish do you have to be? What Scott Jennings is saying is that your guy said that despite knowing this accusation from the Republican woman that he committed domestic violence again, still my dude. By standing with him, that means they said it was okay with him. It wasn't disqualified. But listen to this idiot, which is, I think, the only thing outside of Scott Jennings that they will hire at CNN, try to twist that.
Be honest about it, Scott.
I listened
to
the
be honest
interview.
about it.
You asked him the right question. Why didn't this other stuff give you any pause?
Mm-hmm.
And it was only this most recent allegation. So Nazi tattoo, domestic violence against Lindsay Feifeld. She was a conservative, which they raked over the coals at the time she came out. You know, the masturbating in porta potties, wishing death on fellow military service members, self-described communist. All of that is fine with the Nirav Shahs of the world. But this latest victim, her politics were correct and his poll numbers are falling. So now they're able to get some courage when they had none before. They knew he was a scumbag before and they stuck with him.
So to be clear.
They knew he was a scumbag and stuck with him. Scott Jennings, bingo. And that's why John Fetterman finally said, yeah, the trash took itself out. That is exactly correct. All right. A lot of this just has to be said, honestly, as directly as I'm saying it right now, because as I said in my road rant video, and if you're not following me, by the way, on all of the platforms, please do that. Follow me on X, follow me on YouTube, follow me on Rumble, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, please. Just look for my name. You'll find me pretty much in all those places. I upload my road rant videos to those. And as I pointed out in the road rant video, they have to pay a price beyond just, okay, Platner can't run anymore. They have to pay a much bigger price because that party, again, writ large, was A-okay with all of those things that Scott Jennings just ran down and that I did at the beginning of the segment. They were fine with that. And that means they can't lead America. And so all of their candidates must pay a price. The Democrat Party tried to run a rapist Nazi communist and say, that's our guy, until the polls showed he can't win. And then it's, we found out he's a rapist, so he's got to go. No, do not let them get away with that. Make them pay a price. Any moderate voter that you need to tell that to them. If they're coin flippy between getting out and voting for Trump or Trump's agenda, the Republicans or the Democrats to lead this country, in the midterms in which all the seats are up for grabs in the House and in the Senate, some extremely important races. If they're undecided, tell them that. That's the party. That's what they did. It's not just what Graham Platner did. Extraordinarily important. All right. Also important to me is my friends, my partners, my supporters here at Strictly Speaking Unfiltered, including our guy, Charlie. Now, I don't know where the mechanic is this morning. I needed him to come through. I see he's in the chat room now. Mechanic, where's my video? Where's my video? Where is my video? That's what I want. 3:30 in the morning, Charlie, my guy, who I'll tell you about his business there, you see on screen in a moment, 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:56. And I saw this at about 6 a.m. I said, wow, Charlie was up late. He really wanted to get me his video from last night, because Charlie was the invited keynote speaker at the Parma Republican Club meeting last night in Brook Park. I didn't make it out, but yesterday on the show, I said, hey, anybody gets video of that, I'd love to see it. Well, Charlie told me beforehand, hey, I'm going to have it recorded. I've got a tripod. I'm going to set it up and I'm going to record it. When I do, I'll send you the link. Oh, okay, great. I get up this morning, get out of the shower at 6 o'clock. I look at my phone. Hey, Charlie sent me something at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:56 in the morning. It's a YouTube link. All right, I can play a little bit of Charlie's video on the show today. I open it up, and it's fireworks. He sent me fireworks. Apparently, he and his friends had some pretty good fireworks on Saturday, which is great and enjoyable, but I'm not going to play them on the show. I had to text him and say, bro, what am I supposed to do with this? And you know what? In Charlie's defense, he has dropped a few things on his head a few different times when he's got that car up on the lift and he's working underneath it and making your car great again. There's been more than a few tools that have dunked the head of our friend. And of course, I say all of this in great jest and in great fun because he is such a good kid. Young Charlie, the phenomenal mechanic at Charlie's Auto Repair, is a wizard, and I call him young compared to me. A lot of people are young compared to me now. For a couple of decades now, Charlie has been doing this thing, and he is a phenomenal mechanic. And the best part about his skills is that it's really not his skills; it's his honesty. He's going to tell you what it's going to cost up front. He's not going to slide any extra cost in there because of parts he didn't know were needed and things are going to take longer. No, he's an honest mechanic, and that's why, you know what? It shouldn't surprise you that he's America first, nor that he is MAGA, nor that he is a foundational partner of this podcast. So I want you to go to Charlie. If you're in Northeast Ohio, he's in Lakewood, call. First, you're going to need an appointment because there's no place for you to pull into the lot most of the time. He's got a lot of people there that he's serving. 216-470-0170. It's on the screen, 216-470-0170 for Charlie's Auto Repair. Whether it's routine maintenance or you've got a real problem, he will diagnose and fix and handle. Get yourself out to Lakewood and Charlie's Auto Repair. So I said all of that because, like I said, I wanted to play a little bit of his video, but he sent me fireworks instead. So I'm not going to be able to get the video uploaded, the right video of his speech last night. But he was the keynote speaker at Parma Republicans, not for his mechanic skills, but because of his Second Amendment knowledge. He is a massive Second Amendment supporter, one of the best in Northeast Ohio, maybe one of the best in Ohio, quite frankly. And he knows it inside and out. That's why he was my go-to guy down in Texas when we went to the NRA convention and we did shows from there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the presentation that he gave last night, and I will share it for you on an upcoming episode, maybe tomorrow. I just have to get a chance to look at it, obviously, which I have not, but maybe. But I did see the fireworks, so thanks, Charlie. We love Charlie. I want to get into two other things, and I want to make a couple of announcements here. First of all, in the second hour of the show this morning, I'm gonna give you Keith Faber. I was really impressed with Keith Faber. I interviewed him 2 nights ago on a pre-record because he wasn't available during the show, and I don't think I knew enough about him before. He's the state auditor. I interviewed him a couple of times through the last couple of years for whatever reason or another, but I didn't know enough about him, and I didn't know enough about who he was, not what he was as a state auditor, who he was. I spent that hour talking to him the other night, and I will tell you, I know a lot more about who he is now, not what he is. And I was duly impressed. He's running for Ohio Attorney General. And I really enjoyed that conversation, and I think you will too. So we're going to have that for you coming up here shortly after 8 o'clock. Second announcement is for Monday. I have been clamoring to put this together and working behind the scenes to figure out who the right people are to be a part of it. I am of two minds on the data center question. I've talked about this in some depth, about the need to make sure that the Chinese don't cook our lunch. When it comes to AI, when it comes to cloud computing, when it comes to data and being on the cutting edge and being the world leader, if you will, in AI, in tech innovation, and so forth. And the data centers are a big part of that. And I know that we cannot be subject to Chinese propaganda either, which is trying to flood the U.S. marketplace and social media with anti-data center stuff because they want to take advantage of it. So I don't like that. I want to make sure that we are on the leading edge. But on the other hand, I have heard so many horror stories and some reasons to be very, very against the proliferation of data centers in Ohio. And I asked Vivek Ramaswamy about this on the show last week or the week before about data centers, and he gave me some pretty good responses. He also has some concerns, but some ways to address those concerns. But so I don't know, should I be pro or anti data center? I haven't decided. So I thought, and what I do know is when I would ask friends in the conservative movement about this, I got two different answers. And so I said, I need somebody to bring all of this together. Somebody needs to bring the pro-data center conservatives together with the anti-data center conservatives, because we're all conservatives. And yet this is dividing us right down the middle. Somebody needs to bring them together and have this out and talk this out. Reasonably, because we're conservatives and we're not left-wing zealots who are going to just throw freaking word bombs or word salads. So I said, somebody needs to do that. And I kept waiting for somebody to do it. Nobody was doing it. So I said, what the hell? I'm somebody. I'll do it. So Monday, we're going to have a 6-person panel discussion. 7 if you count me. But I'm going to be more just, I want to hear. I don't want to talk. I want to hear. So Monday morning, 7 o'clock for the full 2 hours. We got a 2-hour panel discussion of data center proliferation and what we should do about it. On the proponent side, people who say that the data centers, we absolutely need to construct them. We need to stay ahead of China. Most of the concerns that have been raised are from China, and it's propaganda and it's wrong. 3 strong conservative voices, one of which is Tom Zawistowski. Tom Z is a patriot par excellence. You already know him. Second on that group is Jeff Mahalik. Jeff Mahalik. Jeff and I are working on a couple of other things together. Super strong conservative. He was in Columbus with us back on the 22nd at the AFP event. And Jeff and I were talking then, and he said he is in. He's also very pro-data center. He's in that industry too. Third, Greg Lawson from the Buckeye Institute, whom I got confirmation from yesterday. He will be able to be. He is also very pro-data center. So those are 3 strong conservatives saying, let's go. On the opposition side, people who I also have a great amount of respect for, Mayor John Mara, who I had in my studio back when we were doing the terrestrial radio thing as a big part of the property tax debate. And, the fight to end property taxes in Ohio. But John Mara is going to be there on the opposition side, basically saying we cannot do this. We cannot allow these data centers to, first of all, in addition to the resources, the privacy aspect, everything about us is being stored on these things. It's cheapening or lowering the value of people's homes, and all of those kinds of things. A ton of reasons. Like I said, that's why I'm of two minds here. I'm literally undecided on this. So John Mara is going to be there. Former Secretary of State candidate Marcel Sturbich is ready to go. He's got major problems with the data center expansion and proliferation and plans and so forth. Marcel Sturbich shouldn't need to. He's been on my program many, many, many times over the last 3-4 years since he started, trying to alert the people about the problems in the Secretary of State's office with respect to election integrity, and then as a candidate. Marcel is in, along with John Mara. And then rounding it out is our friend from OAMF, Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom, Stephanie Stock, who is actually writing a bill trying to limit the data center. She's trying to put this in place. She's a fixture in Columbus, usually writing bills and getting sponsorships from representatives on the medical freedom front. This is also a passion project for her. So she is against the data centers unless a whole lot of guardrails are in place. So she's going to argue from that vantage point. So there you have it. 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. I'm going to sit in the middle, and I'm going to try to make the Brady Bunch thing happen on the screen. Because I think I can actually have up to 10 people on at one time, but we're going to have 6, myself and 6 others, and I'm going to try to sort them out that way if I can set up the grid that way to have 3 on one side that are the proponents and 3 on the other. I just don't know how that's going to look, but I can promise you that the content is going to be fantastic. And I hope by the end of it, I will have decided which way I'm on so that I can make an argument, an impassioned argument going forward. Right now, I see both sides very, very strongly. And so I'm looking forward to this. So in advance, to Tom and to Greg and to Jeff and to Stephanie and to John and to Marcel, I think that's all 6 of them. Thank you for being willing to do this. Conservatives are, like I said, they're divided on this thing, and so I really want to make sure that we give it the attention it deserves. All right. Having said that, I've got 2 more subjects that I want to get to before I bring you Keith Faber, Ohio Auditor. President Trump took his anti-communist argument to the world stage when he was in Turkey at the United Nations meetings, and I was so glad to see this. You know, I've been doing the communism kills and socialism kills arguments and presentations on air, in my Sunday briefing newsletter and so forth, for so very long, warning people, playing the Reagan clip, talking about how a Cuban refugee was telling 2 Americans, "You're not lucky, I'm lucky, because I was able to escape a communist nation and come to a free one. If the United States ceases to be a free nation, there is nowhere to escape to." So anyway, I've been beating this drum for a long time. And so not enough people, quite frankly, not enough. If more conservatives had spoken out with passion and vigor and with consistency about the dangers and the threats of socialism after Mamdani got elected in New York, if the alarm bells had been rung and the flags had been raised, the red flags about all of this, the actual red flags with the hammer and the sickle on them, maybe some of the other communists who have won since then wouldn't have. Somebody needs to be loud and outspoken about this. Well, President Trump was, again, and this wasn't even in the United States. You know, he should be preaching to the capitalist choir while he's in the United States, but he took the anti-communist message to the world stage, which is even better. Let's listen to our president.
No, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Iris Tao.
Who you with?
NTD
Why don't you say your name and who you're with? It's always helpful.
Thank you, Mr. President, for doing this. Iris Tao with NTD, with a sister media with the Epoch Times.
Okay.
On communism, you've been issuing a wake-up call to Americans at home about the dangers of communism. And now you're speaking on the world stage. What's your message to people both living under communist and socialist regimes, but also people living under democracies like in Europe and America who might not have realized how close communism has come to home?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. But look, I want to get the word out because what's forming is communism in the country. And communism's easy to sell. I would be the greatest communist in history. I'd be right up there with Lenin. I'd be as good as anybody. You've got free rent for the rest of your life. What they don't say is that you'll be living in squalor in 12 months. You've got the free house. Would anybody like to have a free house? We'll take it away from somebody. We'll give it to you. You'll have murders all over the place. Communism's a disaster. It's been proven to be for thousands of years under different names, but same thing. It's very important. And, you know, it's funny. One of the reasons I do so well with Hispanic people, I set a record, Republicans. I get great numbers for the election, helped me get elected in a landslide, the Hispanics, because a lot of them came from countries that were essentially communist. You know, whether you call them radical socialist or communist is not that much, but there's a little difference. When they say social democrats, well, social democrats, it sounds so nice. It's not nice. It's a very dangerous term. So I do talk about it, and I talk about it on TikTok, and I talk about it everywhere. I talk about it here. And you're right, it has become international, but it's never worked, and it's not going to work. What is working is the United States. So think of it, we have more jobs than we've ever had. People are making more money than they've ever made. I'm talking about workers now. I'm talking about workers. They're making higher salaries than they've ever made before. It's just the best system, and it's got flaws, but everything's going to have a little flaw, but it's been amazing. And when I watch what's happening and I see these lowlifes getting, I mean, they're lowlifes. I watch them. I know good people. I know quality people. These are essentially lowlifes. And when I see what they're talking, I think they're very dangerous in many ways. And I've said it. And then I said, boy, that's a pretty big statement. Then I realized, a couple of people said, I think you're probably right. I think this country, with this thing that's going around, is in more danger than it was during World War I, World War II. If you talk about September 11th, if you talk about Pearl Harbor, that was big danger. I think the concept of us going communist, because one thing that happens when you go communist, you never come back, never comes back. You die in squalor. You die a horrible death. You die in squalor, and it gets very evil and very nasty.
You die a horrible death and you die in squalor. Typically you die, he's exactly right, and typically you die in starvation. It's forced famines is what it is. Every word of that is 100% correct. With the exception of calling it social democrats. He meant to say democratic socialists. But you understand this point. He's spot on. And when he talked about the threat to the country that 9/11 was, and not just the threat, but the action, the carrying it out, and Pearl Harbor, the threat of the United States flipping to socialist and communist leaders, it may not happen overnight, but when you have the Mamdanis and you have the Wilsons and you have so many of these individuals we've been listing over the course of the last few months, it's going to be communist leaders taking over our most sacred institutions, the halls of Congress, executive offices. When that happens, we will be on that slow road, like a slow boat to China, literally communist China. That's kind of the path we would be on to destruction, that few people have any idea. They just think that communism is another economic system. It's just another economic theory. It's a little bit different than capitalism. You know what? That's why there's, options out there, Democrat, Republican. Yeah, they're good and bad about both. Yeah, there's good and bad about capitalism. There's good and bad about communism. If we try that for a while, no big deal. The president wants you to know there is no coming back. When communists take over, they take over forever, unless they are beaten in a war. And if they take over the United States, the only war that could beat them then would be a civil war. And I don't think you want that. We don't want that. So it's got to be stopped in its tracks very early on. If it gets traction and it gets moving, like President Trump said, you can't come back from it. So really, really important point there. Last thing I want to say before we bring you Auditor Faber, who wants to be the Attorney General, and you're going to want to hear this interview. It's fantastic. He's very, very strong, very, very conservative, much more so. You probably don't know a ton about him. I know I did not know nearly enough about him, if I'm being 100% honest. But what I want to do is I want to make a couple of comments. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of queuing things up here. I want to make a couple of comments on what's been going on for the last 3 days. Today is day 4, tomorrow day 5 in the Charlie Kirk murder evidentiary hearings. These hearings are obviously intended to, for the judge, it's a little bit unorthodox. It's a little bit unusual because usually evidentiary hearings are much shorter than this. They're just done very quickly, in which a judge, hears enough to say, yep, there's enough to proceed with a trial. So, let's go. But this is a 5-day event. and it's a public event. It's a public spectacle. It's the first time that Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's parents, and so forth have been in the same room with Tyler Robinson, who killed Charlie Kirk, and Tyler Robinson's parents, who turned their son in after murdering Charlie Kirk. So it's a very public spectacle. The other thing that's very public, and I talked about this last night with Dr. Piper. I should clarify that part of this too. It's Thursday. You may be wondering, what about Dr. Piper? Literally, I just have everything pushed back a little bit because of, like I said, Auditor Faber is going to be today. And the interview I did last night with Dr. Piper, which is an absolute must listen. Absolute must listen, not just for the Charlie Kirk part of this, but for the core of the discussion, which had to do with basically the intertwining roles of Judaism and Jews with the existence of the United States and vice versa. Something Mike Huckabee said that has just set a controversy, set it on fire. It's really a fantastic argument and a piece that Dr. Piper did. You're going to want to hear that's tomorrow. We're going to have that on tomorrow's show. So Piper tomorrow, Faber today. But also, in addition to that, Piper and I talked about the Charlie Kirk trial. And you cannot talk about the trial without hearing about all of the nonstop conspiracies being spewed forth from the likes of Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, what's his name? Ryan, Sean Ryan. These are people who used to be a part of the conservative, Megyn Kelly, people who used to be part of the conservative podcast, broadcast, influencer community, who have all gone just batch crazy. The theories include that Turning Point USA had Charlie murdered because the underlings who worked for Charlie wanted to take over and to be the face and to be the leader. Erica Kirk had Charlie murdered. They've said these things. They've intimated them in some cases, and in some cases they've outright said them. That Erica Kirk is either responsible for the murder or knew who was and was responsible for the cover-up. Israel killed Charlie. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, killed Charlie because Charlie was evolving his thinking about Israel. He used to be super pro-Israel, and he was starting to pull back a little bit from that. And so Israel, we got to take that guy out. Israel did it. The French military did it. There are a couple of other countries, I think, that were involved in it too, according to, and all of this, by the way, or most of this came to light by way of a dream that Candace Owens had, in which Charlie came to her in a dream and said that it wasn't Tyler Robinson. Tyler Robinson, she said, was never even on the campus of Utah Valley University, UVU. Clearly a patsy just invented out of thin air. This is just some of the crap. I want to say this because I've had this conversation off air and privately with a few different people who, what about the bullet? What about the bullet not making an exit wound? What about the fact that a bullet fired from a rifle, a 30-06 from that distance would absolutely have exploded out the other side of his neck? How come? So therefore, these conspiracy theories are all in play. And so one of the other ones was that he was never actually shot. That, as you can see, his shirt boom, kind of ruffle right before the actual neck explode. If you've seen the video, the neck, so, and he was wearing a lavalier microphone, a mic here, and that was an exploding mic or a bullet firing mic. And that's where it came from. Whoever it was on the inside. I mean, this is the kind of crap. So I've said this enough times privately. I just want to say it publicly. If you believe that there was some grand conspiracy involving the Israeli military, Israeli intelligence, the Turning Point, Charlie's friends, Ben Shapiro, all the other people that they're saying were going to have a hand in this. If you were going to take out Charlie Kirk with all of that knowledge and all of that, particularly if it's the IDF, I mean, they're brilliant. They're the ones that came up with the pager idea to take out so many of Iran's intelligence people. If you're going to put something like that in play where you have to kill Charlie Kirk, let's take all of the other crap out and let's just go with common sense for a moment. And you have all the resources in the world. Why would you do it so publicly and so clumsily? If you wanted Charlie Kirk dead for all of the reasons that the conspiracy nuts are offering, why wouldn't you take him out as he went out to his mailbox one day to get the mail and shoot him on his street from a perch someplace, where you don't have thousands of people who are eyewitnesses in attendance at a public event, in which all of those thousands of people had phone cameras going, where they could pick apart any and every little thing that might get in the way of the actual narrative and the patsy that you're trying to sell. If you were trying to take out Charlie Kirk and you have all of this experience and this expertise, why would you do it in the full view of where slow motion videos, every frame by frame of thousands of cameras, not to mention television cameras, where they would all be able to expose your conspiracy, your actions? Why wouldn't you do it quietly? Why wouldn't you have somebody slip something into one of his drinks or into his oatmeal? Or like I said, take him out in a private place where there were no security cameras at all, save for maybe somebody's Ring camera that just happened to see Charlie fall down in his driveway as somebody shot him as he was, at his home. Why would you do that in front of thousands? Would they be so sloppy as to use a 30-06 and then have something happen to not make an exit wound to bring all of this up? Do you think they'd have been that sloppy, or would they have just put one through him and out on the other side? And probably more than just the one shot. They're saying that all of these massive organizations conspired to kill Charlie Kirk. Why would they have done it in such an amateurish fashion where all of these things can be exposed? I sometimes I just like to boil things down to reason and common sense. If you wanted to do this and not get caught, you do it privately and quietly, not publicly in front of thousands, millions, when you consider the fact that, again, how many of those thousands were live streaming through their phones, to their social media accounts, millions of people watching. Why would you allow yourself to be exposed in such ways? What we have seen through 3 days of evidentiary hearing, videos of Tyler Robinson being on the UVU campus, coming to and leaving at multiple times that day. And he lived 3 hours away from it. So he was there that day for a purpose. They have presented evidence of his confession. They have presented evidence to his boyfriend, his trans furry boyfriend, or whatever it is. The DNA evidence, the fingerprints on the rifle evidence, all of the things that you would think would be obviously common sensible to make sure that they did not have, if you were gonna execute Charlie Kirk and then set up a patsy like this. There are so many elements of it that make no sense whatsoever. Why would you let your patsy be put into a position where it looks like it couldn't be him? In one video that they've already showed in the evidentiary hearings, he's walking with a limp because he can't bend his right leg. And that's why, because he's got a rifle shoved down his pant leg. And so he's walking like, a Frankenstein monster with a big limp. And then suddenly they see him running. And then he took the rifle apart. How did he take it apart so fast? How did he put it back together? Why did he leave it where he left it when he was coming back to retrieve it? And all the things that, it's like, if you were going to set somebody up like that, wouldn't you be much better at it? And also, why would you let him live? That's why Ruby had to kill Oswald. We can't have the patsy talking about who paid him, who coerced him. If you believe that as a part of the JFK conspiracy, you don't let your your patsy live to be able to tell the tale, it's got to be taken out. So none of this makes any sense whatsoever, except for what has been presented. The evidence, and there have been breakdowns of this. Ben Shapiro has done it. Matt Walsh has done it. Forensic experts have done it, breaking everything down and explaining exactly how and why this was Tyler Robinson and no one other than Tyler Robinson. Again, why would he confess? And why would his parents, seeing holy crap on TV as they were among the millions of people who saw the videos, why would they look and say, oh my God, that's Tyler? That's our son. That's our son on TV who did that. They turned him in. Are they part of the conspiracy? Is Tyler part of the conspiracy? Did he want to let the Israeli, French, Turning Point, Erica, cabal kill Charlie and blame it on him and play a voluntary role in that? I'll take one for the team here. Why would he confess? Why would they all be a part of this grand conspiracy? The trial is going to be fascinating to watch. But at the end of the day, we already know the outcome because we already know the facts and the reality. And this is an absolute comical. It's not comical. It would be comical if it weren't so serious because we're talking about a man's life. And in the case of Tyler Robinson, another young man's life because the government is seeking the death penalty, which they absolutely should. So it's not comical because of the stakes involved. But the level of conspiracy trash that continues to fly around the worst thing God ever created, which is the internet and social media. And I know I am a hypocrite because I use the internet and social media. It's what we're using right now. But it's horrible. And people have access to do things on social media that, quite frankly, should not be done. Like these types of conspiracy nuts who are making millions of dollars advancing said conspiracies, caring not one lick about the pain and the trauma that is being added to the family and the friends of the murder victim. And not to mention the millions of us who were inspired by and educated and informed by Charlie Kirk throughout his young adult life, from the time he was 17 till his murder at age 31. We should have been learning from that guy for the next 50 years. Those who were going to be around in 50 years. And they took it from us. And well, I'll have plenty more commentary on that as the trial actually gets started. This is just evidentiary hearings. Obviously, we'll see what they turn up today, and we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow. But we're gonna follow this very, very closely. All right. I also want you to follow very, very closely our friends at Americans for Prosperity. Two things I want you to do too. This one that you're seeing right now is BuckeyeBlueprint.com. BuckeyeBlueprint.com is the hub for work in the state of Ohio to help the state of Ohio go from being in the middle of the pack to being at the top of the nation in the areas of economics, education, energy, and government accountability. All right. That's what AFP Ohio is all about. Americans for Prosperity Ohio is all about that, improving. And there are so many ways you can help if you go to the website, BuckeyeBlueprint.com. BuckeyeBlueprint.com. But the other one that I don't have pictured on the screen right now, but I did yesterday when we were talking to Donovan O'Neill, is AFPAction.com. AFPAction.com. That is the organization where you can volunteer to really make a difference in this country and in very certain specific races, including Ohio's Senate race. Senator John Husted is trying to fight off a challenge from former Senator Sherrod Brown, and we all know what that means. You've got a staunch conservative being opposed by one of the most progressive, liberal, leftist, communist members of Congress in recent memory, particularly in the Senate, Sherrod Brown. He cannot be allowed to return. You want to fight that? Join AFP's movement. Become a volunteer. Learn. You can be trained on what to do as an activist, to knock doors. They have knocked over 300,000 doors already, trying to remind people how important it is, conservative voters, Republican voters, or right-leaning voters, to get out there and come out in full force, because it is extraordinarily important that we are able to do this and keep Sherrod Brown out. If they flip that seat in a red state to blue in the Senate, the entire thing could be lost. Not even kidding. What can you do? What small step can you take? What small role can you play? Go to afpaction.org to learn more. Just put in your name, put in your email address. Somebody will contact you and you can just talk it out and see what you're willing to do. afpaction.org. And thank you, AFP, for being foundational sponsors of Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. All right. It is 8 minutes past the hour now, so we're going to run this a little bit long, but that's okay, because I told you this is a fantastic conversation that I was able to have with Auditor Keith Faber 2 nights ago. I really enjoyed every single moment of this. I learned a lot more about him than I ever had before, and I think you will appreciate this as well. He is not only our auditor, but he wants to be the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, and I think he is well on his way. Please listen closely, and I'll see you in the chat. Mr. Auditor, good to talk to you. How are you, sir?
Happy to be here. It's a great day in Ohio. Every day is a great day in Ohio.
I would agree with that. It's been a great day, a great few days actually across this country, because we've been celebrating the 250th birthday of this country. How'd you spend our birthday?
Well, hasn't it been great to actually see Americans proud to be Americans again? I've always been proud to be an American, but some on the other side of the aisle seem to only recently reunite with the proudness that comes from being an American. I spent time at home with my family and supporting local community stuff here in Western Ohio. I can tell you it is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. But as I travel Ohio, I say that about most areas of the state. We are truly God's country.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's weird though, when you say it's great to see the other side of the aisle coming around. We might be looking in two different places. I'm not seeing them coming around. As a matter of fact, I did a whole video and I wrote a newsletter featuring these statistics. 27% of Democrats surveyed just last month, approaching America 250. That's why they did the survey. I think it was Elon University. 27% of Democrats say that they will fly a flag on our 4th of July, on our 250th birthday. Less than 20% of them say they are proud to be Americans, literally less than 1 in 5. And get this, 55% of them, Mr. Auditor, 55% of Democrats said they wished they lived in another country. To which I promptly replied, what are you waiting for? There's nobody chaining you here, for crying out loud. You want to go, go. But what
I'll pay the one-way fare for some of them.
Yeah, right? What do you make of that, though? I mean, I know that we are divided, but what do you make of those statistics? That's crazy.
Yeah, this is a real change from even just a few years ago. And I think part of it stems from the Obama era and the Biden era, where they always want to attack. And it's divide. Look, they want to go after Trump. They have Trump derangements, send them at a level that we've never seen before. But as we go forward, I go back to the days of Ronald Reagan, when even the Democrats, we would disagree on policy, but everybody would stand behind the country when we were engaged in battle or to defend the country. Certainly 9/12 on 2001, after the country was attacked, we came together and tried to work together as a country. Unfortunately, there are some in this country that want to turn this country into socialism and communism and take us into a place to where, candidly, the founders wouldn't recognize this country anymore. And that hurts me at my core. And we are seeing, as those statistics indicate, a whole new generation of Democrats out there that believe America is the problem. When I was brought up in my party, and I believe America is the solution. Our values, our principles, our way of life is the way to guide the world to peace and prosperity. America as a leader is a good thing, and the world is a better place when America leads economically and militarily.
Yeah, I could not say that any better. You know who can say everything better than pretty much the rest of us is a man who became known as the great communicator. And that, of course, is former President Reagan. You have on your Twitter feed right now a video you reposted from Elon Musk of President Reagan saying something, and I have played many, many, many Reagan clips on my shows, on the radio, on the podcast for a very long time, because he was so phenomenal. I mean, maybe not even maybe, the greatest speaker, I think, and presenter. Maybe that was the acting chops that he had. I don't know. But in American presidential history. But I had not seen this. Mr. Auditor, I had not seen this particular clip. And it's a 7-minute clip. I'm only going to play the first 20 or 30 seconds or whatever it is until he says what I want everybody to hear. And I'm so glad you put this on. As I prepared for our conversation today, I was able to find this. So I want to play this. I want everybody to listen very carefully because of what you just said about the socialist takeover of the United States of America, or at least the attempted takeover by the Democrat Party. I want everybody to listen carefully.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not too long ago, 2 friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea...
That's it. That's all I needed to hear. That was the part. Mr. Faber, Keith Faber, Ohio State Auditor, candidate for Attorney General. I had never heard those words and those remarks from President Reagan. If we lose freedom here, it's over. There's nowhere else to go. When people lose freedoms elsewhere, they're like, "Please, America, can you take us? We seek freedom." And we are the last bastion of it. I've never heard that, but it has never been more apropos than right now because of the threat we're under.
That's absolutely right. It was Reagan's shining city on the hill. He didn't say we were a shining city on the hill because of our economic vitality. Certainly that was part of it. We were a shining city on the hill because of our values and our principles that stood for freedom and liberty. And that ultimately is why I put that out there. Look, Ronald Reagan is the reason I'm a conservative. Ronald Reagan is the reason that I fight so hard every day as an elected official for my kids and grandkids to know the same peace and prosperity and freedom that Reagan fought for. But ultimately, when we go forward, another great Reagan quote that I talk about all the time, Reagan always said, "We are only one generation away from losing our freedoms." And that happens when we refuse to recognize the greatness of the principles that underlie them. And that is essentially where we are dangerously getting close to. When you have literal communists being elected to Congress and open and out about it. It isn't that they're hiding being communists or pretending to be a moderate like happened in Ohio. What happens is you've got literal communists that are being elected on this democratic socialist platform. That's just a Marxist platform with a little bit of perfume on it. It is still the same pig. And ultimately, that's why we need to be very cautious because, look, it is very attractive to go out there and talk about giving everybody everything for free or trying to right-size all of the injustice that you believe is going on out there in the world. The problem is it is very difficult to do, and every place socialism has been tried on the planet, it has failed. And it has always failed with a lot of death and destruction and a huge, well, look, more people have died under Marxism than any other ism in history.
No question about it. And I'm so glad you point that out. I point that out on every occasion, every opportunity I get. And we talk, and I'll talk about Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge. I'll talk about Mao and the Great Leap Forward. And I'll talk about, Stalin. I'll talk about the bullshit. Cuba, everywhere, you're right. Everywhere it's tried, it's failed. And they all try to sell the same story. Well, they didn't quite institute it right. They didn't have all of the resources that we would have to do it here. Because we've got how many billionaires, American billionaires, and Elon Musk, the man who posted that Reagan clip that you reposted, he's a trillionaire. There's so much money there that if it is spread equitably among the people, it'll work this time. They have said that every single time and place that it has been tried, and it has been wrong every single time, and it has led to hundreds of millions of starvation deaths, if not outright executions, but deaths by famine, because there is never enough money to give away when you're stealing it from people who earn it.
plus, once you start going to a command control economy, when somebody tries to be an entrepreneur, somebody tries to go outside of that economy, the only thing that's left is the force of the state. And that's why the gulags were full. That's why Stalin killed a lot of people. Ultimately, when you are using the total totalitarian power of the state to control the economy and people's livelihood, you have to have some mechanism to force that. And look, I love one of the great quotes historically about representative democracy. Historically, they only work until the people have the willingness and frankly, the realization that they can vote themselves the largesse of the treasury. There have been a lot of people who have said that we're running closely, very perilously close to that danger. And that's why as auditor, I come back in and say, no, I want to get rid of waste, fraud, and corruption and abuse out of the system, because look, we take some of that out, then we can afford the government that we think we want. But as long as people are literally stealing the state and the federal government blind, it's real tough for everybody else to say, no, I'm going to keep working and paying my taxes. I'm going to keep sacrificing and giving my kids less so that I can pay for government, so that somebody can go out and steal and get paid to watch Jeopardy with grandma. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're identifying in the auditor's office. That's why I'm very proud of our work. We've identified more than $9 billion. I think we're really about $12 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse out there. And we will continue to do that every single day that I'm in elected office.
Let's do more of that. I'm glad you went there, because I want to talk a little bit about your work as an auditor, because that is of central importance to the people of this state and should be of this country. I mean, Doge uncovered so much waste, fraud, and abuse, but it is also being uncovered here, strangely, by a lot of independent journalists, just like the ones who went up in Minnesota and out to California. We're finding, particularly in the Somali community, everybody is talking about this and saying, we expect this garbage in blue states. We expect it in blue cities, of which Columbus is one. We don't expect it, though, in the red state of Ohio. So who's minding the store? Who's watching this? I highlighted when you came on here some of the work that you did in uncovering some of the fraud in Columbus, and then of course going back to COVID and talking about unemployment fraud as well. So this is like literally your, has been your number one job, your number one responsibility over the course of the last few years. Tell me how bad fraud in Ohio has been, and tell me what you and others have been doing about it.
Well, let me start out with the premise. It didn't surprise me. Anytime you've got a big government program, we should never be surprised when people will figure out how to lie, cheat, and steal within the program. That is the baseline premise of what we do in the auditor's office. Most people don't know, as state auditor, I've got a criminal division, but I have jurisdiction only over the government money. So I have jurisdiction to prosecute and go after people who are public officials, meaning the government workers and the elected officials who are lying, stealing, and cheating with government money. Since I've been auditor, I think we're at 167 convictions. I'm the first auditor in state history to have personally tried a 4-day jury trial against a lady running a regional transit authority who had an interesting scheme to try and illegally send money to pass a levy and then steal some money herself. That's the kind of stuff we do in the auditor's office. But in the big programs like Medicaid, like food stamps, all of those programs, what we do is we audit the government agencies and try and make sure that they have controls in place to stop the beneficiaries from lying, stealing, and cheating. The problems is we keep finding they don't. They simply don't have those controls in place. As auditor, I would love the ability to go out and grab the people who are actually stealing the benefits and doing those kind of things. But we just don't have those kind of resources in the auditor's office. That responsibility statutorily under the federal law and state law falls under the agencies. And what we keep saying now in 7 audits of Medicaid is they're just not doing their job. We recently released an audit of Medicaid that found, this is 2025, that found that 15.6% of the people on Medicaid in Ohio are ineligible to be on Medicaid. That's upwards of $4.4 billion of payments that went out to people who shouldn't be on the system. That falls directly on the department to make sure they're doing that verification. And in Ohio, our Medicaid system is a shared county state function. So the state will say, well, we rely on Cuyahoga County or Franklin County or Mercer County to do those eligibility verifications. And when they don't do them right, well, we check that and they're just, we think that they should be doing a better job. $4.4 billion better? Maybe we need to hold somebody accountable and start changing the way we do it.
And maybe that's something you could do when we talk about the Attorney General's race and the Attorney General's job. You in that clip that I played at the very beginning, you were very clear and repeated a couple of times. Causation. What was the line, for crying out loud?
Correlation doesn't.
Correlation is not causation. Thank you. I'm blanking. And I get that. I understand that. But we also saw that massive report that was done by the Daily Wire and Luke Rosiak, in which he went to Columbus and went door to door in all of those big buildings. They're in that same complex that were supposedly hospice care centers. And there was no evidence whatsoever of anybody operating those, working in those, or anything else. Just massive, massive amounts of fraud when they detailed how much money was being paid to all of those.
Luke did great work. He built in part on some of the stuff that we had put out there.
That's what I wanted to ask you. How much of that you guys were into?
Yeah. I mean, we've been identifying this since 2019, and we keep and I'll give a little bit of credit to the current DeWine administration. Mike had a Medicaid director who frankly didn't really care about waste, fraud, and abuse. He got rid of her about 6 months to a year ago, and put a guy in who actually seems to care. He's been taking our reports and trying to go about doing this. So I'll give him a little bit of credit for that change.
Okay.
But what Rosiak really built on was in 2024, we issued an audit report that said in Medicaid home health care, they were required under the federal government to put in something called the Visit Verification System, the VVS system. It was supposed to have a GPS tracking so that when somebody goes to do Medicaid home health, which is Medicaid services in somebody's home, you had a way to actually verify that the home health aide was actually at their house and how long they stayed there. And then the billings would be tied to that program. Well, on their own, the Department of Medicaid turned off the system. And in 2024, we found that 56% of the bills did not have VVS verification on it. 56%. Now, as the anti-fraud guy, I turned around and said, hey, I know where to look for the fraud. It's not in the 44% that had the VVS turned on. It's on the 56 that aren't. Let's start there. And so what Rosiak did was went in and looked at that and said, hey, you've got a lot of people that are doing Medicaid home health care. And first of all, the system allows, and this is where I talk about waste and abuse. The current law allows Medicaid beneficiaries, okay, who are home health care eligible. The concept was really simple. What you were going to do is pay for people's home health care expenses to keep them out of a nursing home because it's cheaper and better to take care of them at home. So we're going to give them help cleaning and cooking and their physical therapy and their other services at home instead of sending them to the nursing home if they're eligible. But then we went one step farther, and now we allow also for companionship care. Now, I love that term. So, and then we allowed family members to provide those other services. And so we shouldn't be shocked when certain communities in the state, particularly that have a low historical trust belief in society, that came in and figure out, hey, if I get my mom and my aunt and my grandma and my mother-in-law and father-in-law all on home health care, I can get paid to provide them companionship care, meaning I can get paid to have conversations with them and to watch Jeopardy with them. What a great concept. Well, I always say that isn't necessarily fraud because, frankly, the law allows that. That's waste or abuse. That's stupid. And as I said during my Medicaid testimony, if you allow stupid things in the program, it's real tough for you to complain about stupid. You should fix stupid. But the fraud would be somebody who's doing companionship care, leaving their cell phone that's supposed to track when they're there at the kitchen counter because, you know, mom or grandma's never turning them in for not doing the services and then going to the bar. That would be fraud. But the chances of me ever being able to prove that, almost zero under the current guidelines. So what you need to do is put controls in place that stop that stupid and figure out how to control these so we can catch people who are lying, stealing, and cheating.
That's a great answer, and that's a great summary of the way all of that goes down and has gone down. You just mentioned, though, that, you know, if it's in the law, if it's in the rules, then you can't call it fraud. It might be waste and abuse. So let's hit those two. How much waste and abuse is there? Because I agree 100%. We focus on the fraud because it's the most egregious. And also considering, again, what was discovered up in Minnesota and what's being discovered in Columbus, the two largest populations of Somali nationals in the United States, literally in anywhere in the United States. And all of this is going with a lot of their names attached to this. So we're focused on the fraud, but let's focus on the waste and abuse for a moment there. What would it take to stop that kind of waste? Who writes those rules? Are we talking about legislative work in the GA? What is it that what could we do to stop the waste portion of waste, fraud, and abuse?
With regard to Medicaid, it's a partnership. It's a partnership between our state and a partnership between the federal government.
Yeah.
A lot of what happens in Medicaid occurs with waivers that Ohio asks the federal government to give us so that we can run the system under Ohio basis. And so really I always say the buck stops in the Department of Medicaid. And that's really where the problem needs to start. They need to apply for waivers, as I said, one, to get away from some of this silliness. We should not be paying for companionship care. I'm sorry, I don't think that should be allowed. And I also think you ought to have special reviews when you have a non-disabled individual, meaning, look, I get family care if it's somebody who has a mental health issue or somebody who has a disability, because frankly, moms and dads are going to help care for their disabled children and things like that. And I get all that. But for grandma in a nursing home, look, families should still take care of families. I don't know where we got away from this concept. And I go back to even my own family. My mom died of pancreatic cancer, and I spent the better part of a year going over and taking care of her. I would have never accepted money for it, much less asking for money to reimburse me for my job as a son helping take care of my mom as she was dying with pancreatic cancer. That's the kind of thing that we've gotten away from, this big government nanny state, that somehow government ought to pay me for taking care of my parents. Yeah. And that's part of the issue, that we get back into the waste and abuse side. But we've allowed that to happen. And I remember sitting in legislative committees when a grandparent came in and said, if you don't pay me to take care of my drug addicted daughter's kids, I'm not going to do it. And you're going to put them in foster home.
Well, you know what? I'm so glad you're underscoring all of those points, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, and that's what people are waiting to see changes in. And I really appreciate that from your position as Ohio's Auditor of State. But now let's talk about your position that you would like to gain, and that is to become the state's top cop. Why, Attorney? You've been what? Senate President. You've been Auditor of State. You've been what else?
Legislator, state legislator.
State legislator, yeah. And one more. Wasn't there?
No, it was State House, State Senate, Senate President, Auditor of State.
Okay, there we go. All right. So now you're moving over to, or would like to move over to, the Attorney General's office. First of all, tell me why you want to be Attorney General. What made you decide this is the next level of service that I want to give to the state of Ohio? And well, let's do that one first, then I'll ask you number two on it. Why do you want to be the agent?
And thanks for that question. Look, I love being a lawyer. I've liked being your state auditor. And the reason for that is, auditor, I get jurisdiction over government money. The Attorney General is the next step. It's the next bigger stage. There are a lot of relationships between the auditor's office and the Attorney General's office. The biggest one is I identify things and the Attorney General gets to prosecute or gets to refer them for prosecution. For example, on Medicaid fraud, as auditor, I don't have any jurisdiction to prosecute that. That is exclusively within the Attorney General's office. So I want to carry on a lot of the things we started as auditor and build upon that. But it's bigger than that. As Attorney General, you have jurisdiction not just over government money. You get to go after anybody who's trying to rip off Ohioans, whether it's on cyber fraud, whether it's on elder abuse or human trafficking, or running the state crime lab to help our law enforcement and prosecutors out there who need to rely on those services. For example, most people don't know that the state attorney general runs the state crime lab, BCI, which is effectively the CSI organization for all of Ohio. Except for the really big cities, everybody uses BSA for that type of activity. Mm-hmm. And the Attorney General's office really has an important role in that. And my preparation, both as a legislator, as a lawyer with an active practice, and as somebody who has actually prosecuted criminals and been a probation officer, gives me that unique perspective to come into this job running, not walking.
So the second question I wanted to ask you off of the rip, as far as the AG position, is the current Attorney General. Tell me your opinion of AG Dave Yost, the job he has done, what you would do similar to what he has done, and what you might want to change up a little bit.
Well, ultimately, I think Dave did a decent job within the resources that he had. But one of the things I disagree with Dave on is he didn't seek resources to build the state crime lab up and have them have the tools to better support law enforcement. For example, most of our prosecutors and sheriffs will tell you that when they get into a rape or a homicide, they're being asked, tell us what 5 pieces of evidence you want us to test for DNA. Well, unless you're a savant You don't know which 5 pieces of evidence have that trace DNA that's going to allow you to break the case. So one of the things my background will allow me to do is walk across the street to the legislature and say, look, this is a priority for Ohio. We have to better fund those type of agencies to provide those services to local governments. But ultimately, Dave did a lot of things that were his priorities. My priorities are going to be first and foremost supporting the law enforcement and the prosecutors. We've got a juvenile crime problem running around Ohio rampant. You don't need to listen too much to hear about opening day in Cincinnati, the Bexley, the Toledo shooting. All of these things that are happening every day in the news is largely because we've got local prosecutors and local folks who don't want to hold people accountable. I will be a law enforcement prosecutor in the Attorney General's office. It's not an accident that I've been endorsed by 79 of 88 county sheriffs in Ohio. It's not an accident that I've got the endorsement of most of the county prosecutors, because they understand that I will be a no-nonsense Attorney General who will make sure they have the resources to prosecute and hold bad guys accountable. But take it beyond that. One of the things, Bob, that we're talking about doing is helping Bob and Betty Buckeye, who have unjust insurance claim denials in the Attorney General's office, because we handle not just crime, we handle protecting people from antitrust and bad actors in the corporate world. So most of your viewers and your listeners have had an experience with a health insurance company that they paid premiums to, giving them an unjust denial. Well, I can remember as a legislator, we would get those constituent cases in, and we would call up Anthem or we'd call up United Healthcare and say, hey, tell us what's going on here. Why did you guys deny this case? And invariably, after somebody else outside did an investigation, they'd come back and say, oh, no, that should have been paid. Well, if you're Bob and Betty Buckeye, you don't have the resources that an attorney general or a state legislator or even a lawyer has. And you shouldn't have to go out and fight to get those claims that you should have had paid. And so when I talk to hospitals and doctors about this, they go crazy. What a great idea. Most doctors' offices have had to add 1 or 2 staffers just to help get the legitimate claims paid. And don't get me wrong, there are insurance claims that should be denied. Medicaid claims should be denied.
Absolutely.
But we have an awful lot of gamesmanship by the healthcare industry who's going out there and trying to deny claims that shouldn't be, and requiring people to go through the 9 rings of Dante's Inferno or hell to try and figure out how to get their claims paid. The Attorney General's office will have a healthcare denial mediation program to help resolve those. And that's part of the affordability plan that we're working on to try and use the office to make sure that Ohioans aren't getting ripped off.
Is that unique? Is that unique to Ohio if you implement such a thing? Or
well, it will be a unique program that I don't know of anybody else that's designed, but we're going to partner with the Department of Insurance to have the hammer on them, and our office to have the insurance expert lawyers that will go through the policies and say, no, this really isn't an experimental treatment, guys. You need to pay this. And if they still want to dispute it, then we have the ability to sue on behalf of the Ohioans, or we have the ability to send them to the Department of Insurance for an adjudication. All of those are tools that ought to be done as part of the consumer. The Attorney General office has a huge consumer section to try and help defend and protect consumers from bad actors.
I'm glad you went off into that area about, healthcare fraud, but also healthcare denials and so forth. Really, really important. But just circling back to the crime part of this thing too, as you pointed out with your endorsements by all of the law enforcement agencies and so forth. There's a terrible situation yesterday in Wayne County, and a Redmond officer lost his life. I know you posted about that too on X, and I think everybody is offering their condolences. What is your feeling? We talked earlier on about the socialist candidates, and they're not even hiding who they are. Many of them are saying abolish the police and abolish prisons. Thankfully, I don't think I've heard too much of that from anybody, even from the left side of the ideological spectrum in Ohio. But I'm just interested in your thoughts in where we are. The police are still targeted. ICE and federal officers are targeted, so much so that they have to hide their identities so that their families don't get harmed. Your thoughts on where we are with respect to law enforcement, especially with more and more people on the left going back to where they were in 2020 and 2021, and maybe even back to 2015 and 16 after a couple of other high-profile incidents led to this defund the police movement.
Yeah, memories are short on the left. I believe they will go back to where they started, defund the police, hire social workers, not cops. And you saw all the problems. Look, it was my state house office that got broken into during the riots in Columbus just a few years ago.
Forgot about
I don't think
that.
they knew it was my office, but it was my office. And the reality is that's the kind of problem you see when there aren't consequences for people who break the law. Now, getting back to your direct question, that God bless the family of the slain officer.
Amen.
But this concept that you can resist or oppose law enforcement is crazy. What I train my kids, and hopefully most Ohioans say to their kids, when you get pulled over in a traffic stop or you get pulled over and have an experience with law enforcement, the answer is yes, sir, no, sir, do what they tell you. If they do something wrong we can deal with that later. That isn't the time to try and be an armchair civil rights lawyer. I mean, all the times are to cooperate and get there. And so much has gotten lost by this concept that you don't have to obey what law enforcement asks you to do or cooperate with law enforcement, but it's just the whole respect that has been lost. Frankly, it's also been promulgated by a lot of the people on the left. This whole concept about cooperating with ICE. Okay, if somebody's here illegal, you start out with the premise. Literally, a Democrat congressman said, well, I can't believe that ICE is arresting people from doing nothing else but coming illegally into the country. Okay, I see the crazy in that statement. The reality is, if you have broken our laws, if the first act you do to come into the country is to be here illegally, you have no right to be here. Now, I would prefer we didn't have to use law enforcement and we didn't have to raid people's houses and we didn't have to do all of that. But if cities don't want to cooperate with federal law enforcement, and let them have access to the jails to get the bad guys who they've already arrested and been adjudicated before you let them go out on the streets, you shouldn't be surprised, Mayor Ginther, that ICE is going to go out on the street and arrest the guy who committed multiple rapes, are going to go out on the street and find the guy who was trafficking drugs, or find the guy who's intimidating their neighbors. That is something I demand and ask ICE to do, because it's them doing their job as federal law enforcement.
Super quick, if you would, give me the response you give to those on the left who say it's a civil violation, it's an administrative violation, it's not a criminal violation to just be in the country illegally. They say that all the time.
First of all, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is there to enforce people who come across the border illegally. It is an offense. And the bottom line is, you have no right to be here when you overstay your visa. If you are found, you should expect to be returned to your country. And if you resist during that detention, you are now creating an assault or resisting of a law enforcement officer, which is a separate felony. All of those are things that people forget about. But again, we don't get this. If we don't have a border, we are not a nation. And if we don't have borders that mean something and that are enforced, we have no way to know who came here. We have seen this over and over again. I can give you the list of names that Sean Hannity used to scroll on his TV every night of all of the victims, all of the angel moms who are victims by the people who came across the border. But particularly now we're engaging in hostilities with countries like Iran. We know Iran sent military-age men into this country. I doubt they were coming here just to commit Medicaid fraud. Okay, my guess is that they were here just in case something else needed to be done. That scares the snot out of me. Remember, it wasn't that many people who took down 2 towers of the World Trade Center and took down and crashed a plane into the Pentagon and another in the Shanksville, Pennsylvania, with a few $1 million. That kind of stuff is a real threat, and I hope we haven't forgotten about it. 9/11/2001 was not that long ago. It is something that we need to stay vigilant to keep our communities and our families safe against.
25 years ago. That's exactly right. And, you mentioned the border. We've got to secure our border. Well, Ohio's not a border state, so we can't really help with that. But we sure as heck can help by eliminating the carrot, eliminating the incentive for them to come to the state of Ohio in the form of sanctuary cities. Vivek Ramaswamy, GOP candidate for governor, says he will absolutely outlaw sanctuary cities in the state of Ohio. I don't think he can do that without the help of the Attorney General. Can you give me your feelings on that? How will you work with Vivek? And what do you think of Vivek in his campaign?
Well, the best way to deal, our cities have some degree of home rule, and so you're going to have some limitation without a constitutional amendment. You're going to have some limitation, but you certainly don't have an obligation to give them money to support that activity. And you can certainly do things that through the legislature that will make that much more difficult for them. But back up to your original statement. Ohio isn't a geographic border state, but we are certainly a border state. I took a group of sheriffs and prosecutors down to the border during the Biden administration. I can tell you stories that will curl your hair that we witnessed in those 4 days where we were part of a task force going after the loaders. And the loaders were the people who were transporting the people who came across the border illegally to safe houses in Phoenix or Tucson. And it could be summed up by the last couple that we interdicted. It was a young girl who looked to be about 14. She said she was 19. At the time, I had a 16-year-old daughter, and she looked younger than my daughter. The guy that with her claimed to be her husband or the father of the baby, because I didn't tell you that they had a newborn baby that was less than a year old with them. Think about that for a second. The police officer we were with said, that guy is no more the father of that children than he was. And he said the reality was this guy was 24, 25. He was a cartel person that was sent to watch their asset. Their asset was this young girl who had a baby, and they either abducted her or convinced her to come north. And ultimately, he said 2 weeks after she got up here, she was going to be a sex slave and sold into human trafficking. That's the kind of problem that we had. But unfortunately, we know that that's happening in Ohio. We know that human trafficking, that human, frankly, slavery was being brought to Ohio, and they're paying off their debt. Every one of those people who crossed that border owed the cartel between $5,000 and $15,000. And they're brought up here to Ohio. They're brought all around the country to pay off their debt. And it's not one for one. We know of one small county in Ohio, one small county that has a bodega that is sending millions of dollars a year back to Mexico. Okay. The money's not going to Aunt Esther or Aunt Stafia. It's going to different people in every transaction. Go explain to me how that is somehow expected from a small county's population. It's not. It's clearly money going back to pay for this human trafficking across the border. And so that's happening all over Ohio. So the border was a real problem. I didn't even get into the fentanyl problem. We got there on a Thursday afternoon. Wednesday night, they seized more fentanyl than it would take to kill every single Ohioan 3 times over. So that was a real problem. The border open was a real problem. I could talk about this for hours, but Trump cleared it up largely by changing the policy and changing the focus. That's why having a tough on crime, a seriousness makes a difference. And that's why you need an attorney general who is going to bring that same level of support to Ohio men and women who are on the front lines, keeping our families safe. I will be that kind of attorney general.
I can see and hear that passion. I'm glad I asked that question, because telling that story about your trip to the border, that really brings it home. And I'm glad of that. The one thing you veered away from, because you were telling us that story about which you are so passionate, is just the governor, or excuse me, what I hope is our next governor. Your thoughts on Vivek and his campaign and his candidacy, how you feel that rate. It's a lot tighter, I would think, in a state that is as red as we are. President Trump swept 3 times in a row by 8 points or more. I would think it wouldn't be so tight, but it is a tight race, at least according to the polls, between Vivek and Dr. Lockdown. Your thoughts on it?
Look, Vivek is one of the smartest individuals I've ever had a chance to sit down and talk to. And I've spent hours with him. His way to look at problems, his way to take facts that he's not aware of and marshal them is truly, I think, transformational, and will be transformational for Ohio. Let me just give you one real life example. I spent time with Vivek talking about law enforcement and the issues in our jails. This is something your listeners probably don't know, but ask any county sheriff in Ohio. They will tell you the number one thing they see in their jails is mental health and substance abuse problems. 70 to 80% of the people in most Ohio jails have a substance abuse or a mental health problem. The two are related. Jails are not designed to treat mental health. They're not very good at dealing with substance abuse problems. So you wonder why we have a large recidivism problem. And the sheriffs will tell you that they're being asked to take care of all these problems that we ought to really deal with in our mental health system and in our substance abuse treatment system. That would take a lot of the problems, a lot of the pressure off of our jails. I explained this to Vivek. He met with a group of county sheriffs, and he immediately came up with the reality that we need to spend and invest more on mental health treatment to try and take care of some of our law enforcement concerns. And probably some of that goes back to this concept of getting away from not institutionalizing certain classes of individual. Now, I'm not arguing that we need to go back to the old days where they institutionalized everybody, but we need to make sure people are getting the treatment they need to get better. And jails they don't have the ability to do that. Vivek's ability to recognize that and talk about real solutions is transformational. That's the kind of governor we're going to need. Now, is Vivek a first-time candidate perfect? No. He does not have the experience that an Amy Acton has on running state agencies. But you know what? He also didn't quit when the pressure came on as health director to go run away.
He also didn't run it into the ground. She ran the state into the ground when Governor DeWine gave her the keys. She smashed the freaking car.
Yeah, my mom used to always say, sometimes experience means multiple years doing the same thing wrong. And that's what sometimes, look, I've been in government for a little while. I made this choice because I thought I could make a difference. But the entire time I've been in government, I've been trying to have a private sector life as well, because I think if you become beholden on your government salary, the reality is you'll make decisions that aren't in the best interest of your constituents. I've always tried to put Ohioans first in everything I've done. And I think Vivek will do that. That's what his financial independence is going to give him. But more importantly, he is bringing new ways at looking at problems. Look, is he a first-time candidate? Will he say things you go, huh, really? Okay. The one I'll point out to, okay, is his comment about higher ed. Okay. He is not really going to close down state colleges and universities. What he's going to do is talk about making them more efficient and having them collaborate and try and consolidate programs that are duplicative and get rid of the programs that have 9 students and 50 faculty. All those are great things. I'm all for it.
Agreed.
But the reality is the other side's trying to use a misstatement or a statement off the cuff about some of this to try and scare people. And the reality is Vivek will be transformational. He will be the kind of governor that we can be proud to have. But I go back and say, don't take my word for it. Talk to the people who know and have seen him, and you will hear that he literally is coming from the right perspective. He will be one of the most conservative governors we've had since I've been in government.
We're talking with Auditor of State Keith Faber, who wants to be the Attorney General in the state of Ohio. I want to ask one final question of you here. It's a little bit of a tough one because I'm going to ask you to talk about your party, my party, our party. And it's about turnout in November, because there are a whole lot of people that I hear from in our state who are not excited to go and vote for Vivek, who are not excited to go out and vote. You know, President Trump isn't on the top of the ballot this time, drawing everybody there, and then the benefit goes down the ballot. They're going to have to come out for a reason like you. They're going to have to come out. I just interviewed Judge O'Donnell, Colleen O'Donnell, last week. And she's
going to be wonderful.
She is. And people need to come out for her. People need to come out for Vivek and so forth, because there's no President Trump there. And I hear from a lot of Republicans a lot of hesitancy to do that. They're not crawling over proverbial broken glass to come and vote this time around for one reason or another. And what I hear most often, if I can be blunt, is that they're sick of rhinos. They're sick of people like, sorry, but not really, Governor DeWine. Who has not governed like a conservative Republican, who's governed like a Democrat. The Democrat said, hey, veto the photo ID for voter, mail-in ballots. And he said, okay, I will, and did. He's criticizing the Supreme Court for saying that temporary means temporary when it comes to protected status of the Haitian population, of which he's so fond. They're tired of that. They're tired of the fact that we have a supermajority in the GA. We have every single one of the statewide offices, all Republican, and we get done a quarter of what the same they have down in Florida, for example. They've got a supermajority, they've got a great governor, and they get things done. And people here in Ohio are saying, when are we and our Republicans going to get things done? If we start to see that, I think they will crawl over glass to come and vote for everybody, including you. But what are we going to do, and how do we convince them that the Republican Party in Ohio is not rhino anymore? It is true, full-on conservative.
Look, I'll start out. I am proud of my conservative track record. Another statewide person the other day said that Faber is probably the most conservative person on the ballot. I'll accept that. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud that I started took Jim Jordan's state Senate seat. I'm proud I come from an area of the state that Donald Trump got 84% of the vote in. However, it will be important to make sure we turn out in the rural areas of the state, the suburban areas, and the Cuyahoga Republicans. We need to get everybody out to vote. And it comes down to this simple equation. You cannot be happy with Mike DeWine. You cannot be happy that the legislature or the governors vetoed some things. But think of how much worse it would be under Amy Acton. All of the things that the legislature has done by cutting taxes and doing tort reform and doing regulatory reform and Second Amendment issues, all of that would be for naught under an Amy Acton governorship. And if the legislature wasn't solidly conservative, solidly Republican, think about all the mischief that could be done. Here's a fact that your listeners probably don't hear all the time. I am proud of the fact that when I was in the legislature, we cut taxes. We reformed the income tax rate. We started treating small businesses fairly. I'm proud of the fact that we did regulatory reform and I created the Common Sense Initiative. The list of things that we worked on is large, but ultimately it comes back down to this one question. Where's Ohio today and where were we just a few years ago? Most people don't know that for the last 2 years in a row, Ohio has been a net migratory in-state for jobs and population. Most people don't know that. They don't hear that. They don't talk about that. We are literally the #1 state in the Midwest for job creation and economic activity. That is something that you don't need to take my word for it. We are on the top list almost everywhere on site selection and places to go build and grow jobs. Youngstown is coming back. I was just up there last week, a community that had been really hit hard by all of the Rust Belt issues. They're coming back. Economic activity is taking off. They've got people that are excited to grow jobs. Is it happening fast enough? No, but it is happening. The same thing's happening in Northeast Ohio and Cleveland. You've got companies that are making decisions to stay there. But coming back to your question, why should Republicans get out and vote for Vivek, vote for Keith Faber, vote for John Husted, vote up and down the ticket? This election, we say this all the time as elected official. This is the most important election in your lifetime.
Yeah,
this one may really be because of all the stuff, the cusp that we are on nationally with the coming of this democratic socialism garbage and all the things that are happening. Ohio can continue to be that beacon in the Midwest that will talk about growing jobs, strengthening the economy, making sure that your kids and grandkids have a future in Ohio that is as good as the ones our parents and grandparents sacrificed to give us. That is what this election's about. Vivek Ramaswamy is no Mike DeWine. There's a reason that Vivek comes from this from a very different perspective. He is coming from the perspective of free market capitalism. He is coming from the perspective of making sure that Ohio can be its best going future. That's all he talks about in his stump speeches. I got to take him that he means it. Now, back up. I can now talk about the downside of what happens if John Husted doesn't beat Sherrod Brown. Okay, we know Sherrod Brown. He is no secret. He was the most liberal, even more liberal than Bernie Sanders on some voting metrics in the United States Senate. He is not a moderate. He is not a conservative Democrat. He's a liberal's liberal. And when you go looking at that, if the United States Senate switches to be Democrat, you will see nonstop investigation, impeachment, investigation, Trump bad, Trump evil. Let me just put this in perspective.
An end to the filibuster.
End the filibuster. We're going to change. We're going to make D.C. a state. We're going to make Puerto Rico a state. We're going to do everything to stack the deck. We're going to do court packing. All of these things are crazy, crazy, crazy. Crazy will continue to be the new normal if you give Democrats back the power. But let me make it even simpler. One of the things I did recently was go to Congress and testify on this Medicaid fraud. I jokingly said to a friend of mine, I was in the legislature and the state legislature. Sure, we did grandstanding on testimony. We were maybe 20% grandstanding, 80% asking real questions to try and get information. Congress, 95% grandstanding, maybe 5%. But on the Democrat side, we had members of Congress that spent their entire 5 minutes going through Trump derangements, send them questions without asking an even question. Didn't even say, Faber, don't you think, hey, fraud's bad? They simply went off and off and off that Donald Trump pardoned this person and Trump's bad, Trump's evil. What do you think will happen if they get power? That is such a bad future for our kids and grandkids as to where that's going. 4 years of a bad governor can set Ohio back in places we don't even want to go. And so I will just tell you, is any candidate perfect? No, I'm not perfect. Okay. I'm not perfect. No candidate's perfect. Vivek surely isn't perfect, but he's a dark side better than Amy Acton. And I do believe after spending hours with him, he can be a transformational governor, and he can do all the things that the conservatives have been wanting to see in Ohio for a long time. And if he does what he's campaigning on, and I believe he will, you will see changes in the state that move Ohio not just forward, but put us on an express path to making sure that we are truly the Ronald Reagan shining center. Bring it full circle. The Ronald Reagan shining center, shining city in the Midwest. And I think that that's a future that I look forward to. And look, we have to work together as a team. But Amy Acton and David Pepper and all of the Democrats up and down their ticket, frankly, are borderline crazy. And in the end, their views, their policies, their practices will not take Ohio in the right direction.
Yeah, the only correction I would say, I might drop the borderline. I do. I think they're crazy. I think they're President Trump, when he looked down, and I wonder if I could play this just real quick while you're here, just because this is something, it's one of my favorite moments ever. It was from his State of the Union address when he looked down at them and said, "These people are crazy." Come on, play.
They wouldn't even stand for good. If you had said, "Don't you all love your mother?"
Yeah,
they wouldn't have clapped.
They wouldn't have done it. And that's when he looked down at them, and I'm going to play it again.
These people are crazy.
Not borderline, just straight up crazy. They are.
And that is the Democratic Party of today. I travel the state 3-4 days a week, and I've been all over this great state, and I meet good people. I have Democrats for Faber. Okay. I have Democrat public officials that are supporting me because we've done what we said we were going to do. And I said all the time, the Attorney General's office isn't Republican. It's not Democrat. I will do the job. As auditor, I prosecuted Republicans. I prosecuted Democrats. I will do the job that I'm telling you that I will do. However, when I look at the big picture, the age of the blue dog Democrat or the moderate Democrat in Ohio is gone. It's gone. And look, some would say the age of the conservative or the moderate Republican is gone. It's not. We have examples. Mike DeWine. Okay. Now, I would disagree. Mike DeWine, there are some things on Mike that Mike has done that I will say he has been a good governor on. I believe he believes what he's saying he says. There are things I'd have certainly done differently. But in the end, Vivek Ramaswamy, no Mike DeWine.
Agreed. And that's what Vivek told me last week when I talked to him too. He said, literally, he said, I will be, and he did it without bad mouthing the governor. Good for him. He needed to do that. But I will be the most conservative governor the state of Ohio has ever had. And when you compare it to what we just had, that will not be a big leap. I can say that. Well, I'll tell you what, Auditor Faber, really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm so glad that last monologue you just went on is so important, because I have a whole lot of Republicans that I talk to, the ones that, like I said, are maybe kind of a little bit hesitant and so forth. They're saying, maybe the way we improve the lot of Republicans we have in our state is we take some bad medicine. We got to get some of the bitter medicine down. Give Amy Acton 4 years, and everybody will be so shocked by that we'll come back out and we'll have far more conservatives in response. But you just made the case, I think, Auditor Faber, that we cannot possibly survive that. It's one thing to say, we'll get by it. No. But if we let her take over the state, if we let the Democrats, and by the way, if Amy Acton wins, chances are enough Democrats come out to make sure Sherrod Brown wins, and enough Democrats come out to make sure that all of our most important races go the wrong way. We cannot take chances like that. I really applaud your plea and your appeal here to conservative Republicans and all Republicans to get out there and vote for this slate, because the alternative is the end of our state.
Remember, we were hearing this same thing when everybody who hated Donald Trump in 2020. Remember what everybody was saying? Everybody was saying, well, Donald Trump, he's not a good person. I don't want to spend time with him. He's done some good policy stuff. But even the moderates, the people were out there saying, well, maybe we just need to reset the table and then get somebody we like, whether it's Congress or whatever. Do you really want to go through 4 years of Joe Biden-like government in the state of Ohio? We saw how bad it was.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure Joe Biden knew what day of the week it was, and he turned it over to the progressives in his administration to open the border and do all those bad things. But you can see what happens when the Democrats get control of those levers of power. They are unabashedly trying to make sure they control them to be able to generate the utopia that they believe can come from big government and anti-statism. And that ultimately is one of the problems that we need to stay attuned to, because if we let them go that direction, our kids and grandkids will not have the future, will not have the Ohio that they're entitled to. Look, I'm a Republican. I'm proud of my party. I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to fight for Ronald Reagan values throughout my career. But I'm not a Republican because I believe elephants are cooler than donkeys. They are, but I'm a Republican because of the values that this party stands for. And when the party stops standing for those values, I'll say I'm not a Republican anymore. But ultimately, I'm confident this party today will continue to fight for freedom, faith, and our country.
Amen to that. Auditor and hopefully soon to be Attorney General Keith Faber, I've really enjoyed the conversation, literally every minute of it. Thank you so much for the passion you bring to this. Keep up the fight. Obviously, there's still 4 months between now and November. Hopefully, we'll talk again, see what the new developments are in this campaign, and I wish you the very, very best.
One last going away plea. I'm running to be your Attorney General. I'd like your vote. If you have questions about me, keithfaber.org, keithfaber.org. If you have a question for me, keith@keithfaber.org. We'll respond to those emails. Do me a favor. If you think I'm only half crazy and you want to vote for me, talk to your friends and family and go out and say, hey, Faber's only half crazy. Vote for him for Attorney General.
Love it. Good stuff. Thank you, sir. There you go. That's it. That's all I've got for you this morning. That's all I have to give. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Compelling evidence thus far. Today started at 1 o'clock.
Got something else starting up there. We don't want to let that interfere with us as we close it out today. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciated the conversation with Keith Faber. Keith Faber, learned a lot more about him than I ever did before, and I hope that helps you too as he runs for Attorney General. Also, really in-depth information there on John Husted and why we have to come out strong for John Husted and not just be like, well, we're against Democrats, we're against Sherrod Brown. We got to be for something. We got to be for John Husted as well. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to have a little bit of the politically incorrect mechanic, Charlie, in his Second Amendment presentation to Parmer Republicans. And then we're also going to have Dr. Everett Piper tomorrow as well. Don't forget Monday, the day. Oh, I made a thing. I did a thing during that break. There we go. Or not break, but while the interview was replaying there. That's Monday. That's our unfiltered data center panel discussion. Conservatives, all. Tom Z, Jeff Mahalik, Greg Lawson, all for data center growth and expansion. And Marcel Sturbich, John Mara, and Stephanie Stock all oppose data center expansion. We're going to have it out. We're going to have a discussion. It's going to be a great discussion. That's what conservatives do. I'm very much looking forward to that. And I think Monday, 7 to 9, I think a lot of other people will get a lot out of that as well. All right, that's it. That's going to do it. Thank you, everybody. Be well, be safe, and stay free. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.